Could we get an upset in Oxford against the number 4 team in the country in Ole Miss? Well, for Washington State, that would mean a lot of good things for first-year head coach Jimmy Rogers, but I'm not ready to go that far. But I do think that it's going to be a lot closer than many are talking about, especially Vegas. Let's dive into it here. Washington State heading onto the East Coast, heading to Oxford to take on number 4 ranked Ole Miss, 5-0 team. On Saturday, this game will be at 12:45 Eastern Time, 9:45 Pacific. You can find it on SEC Network. The line is Ole Miss by 32.5. It's actually moved down just a little bit. I think it was started off at 34, the earliest I saw, and I think for good reason that it's heading in that direction. Now, if you want to play the game, Ole Miss is 4-1 against the spread. Washington State's 2-3 against the spread, but you have to remember that there's a new quarterback that's been there for the last couple games in Zevi Eckhouse. Ole Miss is a good team, and for good reason why they're ranked in the top 5 in the country. And I think it's going to be a very tough battle for Washington State. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. I don't expect a win for Jimmy Rogers and the Cougars. However, I think there's a way to leave this game as a respectful loss, and even in a better way, a better feeling. And I know we're not trying to give moral victories here. I'm not trying to do that in this podcast, but you got to be realistic, right? You have to keep that in mind here. You kept up for the first 3 quarters against the Washington Huskies in the Apple Cup. It all fell apart in the 4th quarter. But for the first 3 quarters, that game was anyone's game. You could do the same thing against this team, the Ole Miss. You could do that. You could make that happen against these Rebels. You absolutely can. But multiple things have to go right, and that's what I want to dive into on this episode. If an upset is going to happen, here are the keys to the game to maybe an upset or at least make it close, and dare I say just cover the spread for Washington State. First, of course, let's the easy one. Let's do the cop-out one, and that's ball security and turnover margins. The Cougs can't turn it over. They've had 8 turnovers in the last 3 games. It's killed momentum. You just can't have that happen. That's just an easy one. Let's start off with the easy ones right off the bat. And let's put it in. You got to win that turnover battle too. Not only you can't turn it over, you got to find a way to win that one. Washington State has a -6 margin so far, ranks 126 nationally. So it's a must-flip game for Washington State when it comes to the turnover margin if you want to keep it alive against one of the best teams, and not just the SEC, but all of college football. And let's throw in one more here. The offense had too many drops over the last couple of weeks, especially that 20-3 victory against Colorado State. And I think that game could have been easily 41-3 if you would have had some of those extra catches in the end zone. You can't have any of those drops against Ole Miss. You have to capitalize on every single possession, and I'm talking with 6s and 7s, not 3s and 0s. You absolutely have to make that happen. The offensive game plan, of course, will run through Zevi Eckhouse, and I think Zevi Eckhouse has the composure to stick in Oxford, which will be probably the largest game with fans and attendance he probably has ever played in front of this coming Saturday when they take on Ole Miss in SEC country. Those stadiums are packed, and there's probably not going to be another stadium all year and maybe the rest of his career with a helmet on his head where he plays in a bigger one. However, I think he has the confidence and composure to keep it under control. I don't think he's going to make some ill-advised decisions because of the pressure of the fans. I just don't believe that. If we were still talking about maybe some of the younger quarterbacks that started off the season for Washington State, I don't think I'd be able to have that same type of feeling. But Zevi Eckhouse gives me that confidence and composure. I think they can make that happen. They have to control the clock, though. Washington State must lean on its run game, and that's something that's been terrible all season long. But look, Ole Miss hasn't been the best. If you're looking at and pinpointing one thing on Ole Miss's defense that hasn't been the best this year, it's their rushing defense. They have been ranked 100th in the country, allowing 163.8 yards per game. And if you want to compare that to their passing side, they're 25th best in the country. So if you move one dimensional, if you can't run the football like you couldn't do for the majority of this season so far, and you go one dimensional and all you have is Zevi Eckhouse and his beautiful post balls, his beautiful post route passes, then I think you're in big trouble. So you have to find a way to establish the run. 100%. Turnover margin, establish the run. A lot of things that make it just normal sense with fundamental football, but something that Jimmy Rogers really hasn't got to on a normal day-to-day basis for Washington State so far this season. And if he can turn it around against Ole Miss, then that would be a huge statement win, not only for Jimmy Rogers and his beginning of his era and his tenure in Pullman, but for recruiting wins. And that means a lot, as we just talked about at the beginning of this episode, heading into the new Pac-12 in 2026. Of course, you can't force the run, though, if it's not working. LSU nearly beat Ole Miss. Now, I'm aware I'm comparing LSU to Washington State here. Hear me out, though. LSU nearly beat Ole Miss with under 60 rushing yards. They had 57 rushing yards. Zevi and the receivers can stretch the field if they're clicking. If you're talking Meredith, Ellison, some of those other guys, even if you get Trey Lechner involved with the tight end game, even on that short game, if that's what you have to do, you make it happen with Voorhees as well, and you make that work. If that's the case, you kind of utilize the short passing game with Voorhees and Lechner instead of the rushing game, something they've utilized in the past, especially against the Huskies in the Apple Cup. And you have to reduce the Ole Miss long drives. They've been very methodical this year with 10-plus plays. You have to find a way to take calculated risks defensively to steal extra possessions from Ole Miss, because most likely Ole Miss is not going to punt in this football game or have many turnovers in this one, because they are a powerhouse team. They are on paper, talent level, execution level. There's a reason why they haven't lost a football game yet. There's a reason why the AP poll thinks they're the 5th best team in the country. They are better than Washington State. So in order to steal one in Oxford, you have to do everything better and then some. So taking calculated risks defensively, and maybe sometimes not calculated risks, just risks in general, Jimmy Rogers, I think, is going to have to get a little bit creative and aggressive. And if there's one thing I so far have found out about Jimmy Rogers, he's an intense dude. I don't think getting aggressive is anything that we're going to have to worry about. On the defensive side, you got to bend and you can't break. You're going to have to bend. There's no doubt. Ole Miss is going to work you, but you can't break. Field goals are fine. Touchdowns are not. And that's a very tough thing to do against one of the best teams in the country, but you got to create pressure and force mistakes. You force third down and long situations as well. That also helps, because when Ole Miss has been pushed behind the chains, their efficiency drops. In most of their wins so far this season, only one time have they been above 50% on third down and longs, third down conversions, I should say. So you got to make that happen. You also got to make them beat you through the air. The Ole Miss quarterback competition or completion rate, not competition. The quarterback's completion rate has declined every week since he took over for Austin Simmons in week 3. And of course, you got to find a way to contain those scrambles, because if you can't control him through the air, if you can't force him to pass, that means you're letting him run around. You got to contain him. You got to set the edge, and you got to make him throw the football. Have faith in your Washington State secondary. That is your best case scenario. And of course, if you get that third and long situation, you got to win on third down as well. Control the tempo, play complementary football with a strong start, and have energy and confidence. That's how you win this football game. A lot of things have to go right. I mean, I could have listed basically everything, and I kind of did. But that's exactly how I feel about this Washington State game. There'll be still lots of good things to look after when we're done here. I don't expect this one to be a blowout. I don't think this one gets as bad as the game in North Texas. Now, Ole Miss is a better team than North Texas by a mile. Don't get me wrong. But Zevi Eckhouse wasn't the quarterback in the beginning of that game that threw all those interceptions against North Texas. I don't think Zevi Eckhouse is going to be a turnover machine in Oxford. I just don't. I think they find a way to keep it around and be fairly close heading into halftime. Ole Miss will probably get the better of them in the second half, probably get better adjustments. You got to remember, Jimmy Rogers is bringing 70-plus transfers, most of them from the FCS level. FCS players learning to be FBS players heading into SEC country, probably not going to be the best formula, but it's a true test for them, true gut check, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what Washington State can do in this one. My prediction, I got 49-21. Definitely it covers, but I think they don't win. They don't get blown out, but 49-21 is what I have it. I think that's fair. I think you can hang your hat on that, especially if you have a strong first half, head them into the locker room sweating. And I think that's exactly what you got to work for. Because after that, you got another tough matchup. You're back in the East Coast again with another AP top 25 team in UVA, Virginia, who's been very good as of late. So lots of good things for Washington State. Do I think they have an upset in Oxford? No, I do not. But if you're the betting man, I'd take that backdoor cover.